All right, we're live. Well, welcome everybody to today's panel, Smart Marketing During the COVID-19 Crisis. We've got a great group of panelists here. I'm going to let everybody go around and introduce yourselves. I'll start with myself. My name is Todd Davison. I'm the founder and CEO of a marketing agency called Demand Frontier. And so I've been in the marketing world pretty much my whole career. I had another agency before this one, and we support many types of clients. A lot of large global enterprises have seen and dealt with this really through two lenses. One as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, worried about my own business and making the decisions there. And then secondly, as an agency, kind of at the table with a lot of our clients across different industries. I think we have some unique perspectives to share. But with that, we'll go kind of around the panel here. Let's see, Joe Lazauskas. I'm sure I butchered that. If you could give everybody an introduction, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Joe Lazauskas. A lot of people call me Laser because they cannot pronounce my last name, as Todd just proved for us. I am the head of marketing at Contently. Contently is an enterprise content marketing platform with a network of over 150,000 freelance creatives throughout the globe. So brands like Chase, RBC, Dell, Bayer use our platform to both manage and organize their content programs internally across lines of business, but also tap into our talent network to create content of all kinds, from articles, videos, white papers, interactive data visualizations. So for me, I see this from two different perspectives as well. One, as a head of marketing at our company, how I've had to adjust to be as effective as possible and for, have our brand step up during this time. But also, we've seen kind of some broader landscape trends of how large enterprise brands are adapting their content creation during this time, and seeing some really interesting things there. So I'll pass it on down to Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Kannenberg. I'm Creative Director of Brand Creative at Sprout Social. We are a social media management platform. So our 20,000 plus customers connect all of their business social profiles through Sprout to manage them all in one place. So as you can imagine, the way consumers, regular people like you and me, are using social has changed pretty dramatically over the last 6 weeks. So our customers have had to pivot to meet that change, not only in what audiences want from them, but in how they can provide better customer care through social. As Joe was saying, rethinking their content strategy, rethinking their engagement strategy. How do we measure success in this time has been a big question from our customers too. And from our own perspective, we are telling very different stories than we would have about how customers use Sprout and what you can do to get the most out of Sprout during this time. So we've had to also, rethink from a creative perspective how we make that kind of content, because we are used to having our in-house studio. We're used to having our entire team together to create content as a unit. And now we're all dispersed and trying to manage shoots from our own homes. So big changes for sure. Some exciting, many challenging. And I can pass it off now to Jill.
Jill, are you there? We're having a little bit of technical issues with Jill getting in. So I see her kind of coming in and out. Are you on? All right. Well, we'll come back to Jill when she gets back in. All right. Well, we had just for the audience out there, we had an internal call, kind of going through sharing experiences, and thought the best way that we could kind of convey value to everybody here today is kind of tee up some talking points and questions, and just kind of hear different perspectives, maybe debate some things out, and kind of go around, try to keep it kind of free form and interactive. So bear with us as we're winging it a bit here on sharing those experiences. But wanted to start with let's start with the most pressing one. What have we learned so far? What have been the biggest learnings that the panelists have had to deal with in dealing with dealing with this crisis. So, Joe, why don't you start us off there?
Sure. So it's been very interesting to see the huge uptick in engagement and demand with branded content over the last month. Perhaps, not something you necessarily would have anticipated. Like, yeah, we knew that people were going to be on gaming platforms more, on streaming platforms, reading the news more. But what we've seen is a 39% increase in overall attention time with branded content over the last month. That's actually according to Nudge, which does analytics for a ton of different branded content across owned properties, but as well as sponsored content campaigns. So that part was really interesting to me, and it kind of echoes what we were seeing on our own platform in terms of increased attention time within our clients, as well as content production overall. And so I think there is a lot of demand for content right now from brands, but it has to be done well. The ethos that I love, that I'm going to steal from a blog post at Hootsuite, is that all marketing right now really has to do one of two things. It has to do good, or it has to make people feel good. So on the do good front, that means figuring out how your brand can step up. How can you do something to help out the world amidst this effort? I mean, that covers everything from Mark Benioff and Salesforce pushing a pledge against layoffs for other corporate CEOs, to LVMH being one of the first companies to turn their plants into hand sanitizer distilleries, Patagonia leading the charge and shutting down all of their stores, right? That do good effort has to be there from a brand, because that's what consumers are craving right now. If you want to really earn trust, you want to earn loyalty, you want to earn brand cred, then you need to do what you can. We're a small startup, but the freelance creative community is really important to us. So we partner with the Freelancers Union to raise $50,000 plus for freelance creatives in needs through emergency grants. Every brand needs to find what that effort is that they can tap into for them. But on the content side, that's where the making people feel good aspect comes in a lot. People don't necessarily want like news updates from brands, but there are a lot of people out there, especially in the B2B space, who are craving the expertise that brands can provide. We're at home, we're trying to research new problems on our own, we want to learn new skills. So what can you spin up in terms of genuinely helpful educational content that will help your audience right now? And I think that's the content strategy mindset that everyone should be shifting to, is to figure out like, what are the unique challenges that your audience is facing, and what can I do based on the expertise that we have in-house to help them get through this time and to level up in their career.
So, and apologies to jump in here. We had a technical glitch at the beginning, so your intros were not seen by everybody at the beginning. That's why everybody's seeing me. And sorry to everybody watching this live. These folks are more interesting than me, but just wanted to let them know to quickly redo their intros and then continue on from there.
Okay, no worries. This is the new norm, right? Everybody's learning to deal with it. So Todd Davison, I'm the founder and CEO of a digital marketing agency called Demand Frontier. Been in the agency business most of my career. Our client base really is across the board. We're mostly B2B focused, business to business focused. So a lot of large global companies like Phillips 66 and BlackBerry and Shell and others. And so really, I have the perspective of both being a CEO and having to deal with our own, kind of crisis management, decision points, all of the things that go into dealing with this, but also seeing firsthand, being at the table of how larger brands are, where are they pulling back? How are they incorporating this into their program strategy? Liz, I'll go back over to you to reintroduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Liz Kannenberg. I'm creative director at Sprout Social. So I work with the brand creative team to create much of the content we publish on our social channels, our 2 blogs, as well as some of our sales collateral. So Sprout is a social media management platform. So our 20,000 plus customers across all segments from SMB to enterprise and agency connect their business social profiles to Sprout so you can manage it all in one place. Content development, engagement with communities, analytics, social listening, and data intelligence, all from one platform. So this has been particularly interesting to see both from our B2B SaaS perspective as how we market ourselves, but also how the wide breadth of customers who use Sprout are having to pivot. And just in general, social media usage has changed quite a bit. So much of our platform and the algorithms we've built to optimize send times and things like that are now seeing returns of some pretty interesting data in the way social media usage among the audiences our customers are trying to reach has changed. So they're having to pivot not only what they're publishing, but when they're publishing, on what channels they're publishing, to match the change in consumer behavior. And that's all happened in a matter of weeks, when it usually takes, the launch of a new platform like TikTok to really change the way people use social. So it's been a really interesting ride from both sides of where I sit as a marketer.
Okay, great. Well, Joe, I'm going to go back to you to give a brief intro. I know we're,
Sure. Yeah.
They missed it.
Yeah, Joe Lazauskas, head of marketing at Contently. We're an enterprise content marketing platform with a network of 150,000 freelance creatives throughout the world. So essentially, very large brands, American Express, Chase, Dell, brands of that ilk, produce all of their content through our platform and tap into our network to create content of all kinds.
Okay, perfect. Well, again, we're going to wing it a bit here. We've gotten into an initial question of
white papers and videos with our customer base. And Liz, kind of following up on what you just said, I'm really curious on the social listening side.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you seeing use cases of customers really using real-time social insights from what their audience is talking about to start to craft their content and marketing strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social listening is so powerful in that it allows you to tap into all public conversations happening on social platforms at once, and then to drill down into the specifics of sentiment about not only your brand, but maybe your category. Geolocation has been really interesting for us as you see social conversations being quite a bit different in a place like New York, where you are, Joe, than it would be in more rural areas, or say a state that has issued shelter-in-place order versus one that hasn't. So businesses in those states are having to face different challenges, and social listening allows you to kind of see from a ground level what people are talking about with how they interact with businesses and how that's changed.
And do you have like a specific
basis.
example of like, I guess I'm really curious as to how people are putting that into action. Like, what do you hear online that makes you like change your behavior?
Like how consumers are changing their behavior?
Or no, how businesses are changing their behavior? Like how do they put that action plan into place?
Yeah, so for instance, we've got a customer who runs a pretty significant part of their business is in e-com, but they also do have a few flagship brick and mortar stores. So they're using social listening from a geographic filtering perspective to see what people are talking about when they do have access to a store that has or hasn't had to close, versus people who don't have access to a store, and how their perspective has changed in using the online platform for trialing and ordering. And they're able to pivot their social content and geo-target their social content to be different based on what the challenges with actually interacting with the brand have been for people in those different locations.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest trends we're seeing is this need to adapt your content strategy and your marketing strategy in real time based on what you're seeing. Like, it kind of forces you to throw that previous publishing schedule or, content and social calendar out the door.
100%.
And those competitive insights in terms of both what the audience is saying, but also what competitors are doing, I think has become more and more valuable. Like, we have this tool within our platform called Storybook that uses search and social listening data to kind of inform story ideas for clients. And so, for instance, we had one client who was wondering, like, oh, should we do a letter from our CEO? And so well, literally every other competitor you have in your competitor set has published one of those on your blog. So that gave them the confidence to do it, or as soon as they saw those start to go up. And I think that's, like, from the technology side, one of the biggest needs of marketers right now is data to support those real-time decisions, especially when you're inside a larger enterprise. And like that, having that data in hand often makes it easier to get buy-in to do something, or helps you cover yourself if, you know, you're making a bold editorial decision.
Yeah, I love that use case too. And it reminds me of something we were just discussing with our own social team earlier about how we're approaching a video we're making. And their listening topic around COVID-19 had raised to the surface some of the more commonly used phrases by brands. And we found that the phrase "lead with empathy" has kind of peaked as what brands are saying they're doing, or what they're recommending that their own customers do in a B2B space. And it happened in a matter of like 3 days. Pretty much no one was using it, and then everyone was using it. And that gave us kind of a nudge in the direction of not using it, even though it's very on brand for us, because we don't want to get lost in that noise.
I imagine you saw a similar thing with "our commitment to you" during this time.
Yes, or during a global pandemic was
Yeah.
uncertain waters and things like that.
I think to weigh in there, you know, I sometimes struggle with, you know, the contrarian me in me says, hey, I always put my consumer hat on, and I think I see it through a B2B lens. So it's it's substantially different than I think the tone that you have to deal with the end consumer. And so I've really been wrestling with, you know, the definitely keeping what's going on in mind, but not just talking about it for talking about its sake. There is a point where business has to go on. And I think in a B2B context, it's a little bit different in that, you know, big decisions still have to be made, you know, strategic investments are still being weighed. And I sense kind of the panic or the initial kind of, oh crap, everybody stop everything we're doing and message just about this starting to fade a little bit. And so, you know, there's no question that every single brand we're working with has had to wrestle with this, but we're definitely seeing kind of I don't want to say business as usual, business as unusual kind of, you know, getting back to, hey, we still have the same issues, the same challenges, same opportunities in many cases to deal with. So I found for our own marketing and our own messaging, you know, we did some, you know, doing this event and done some blogging around it, but really kind of getting back to, okay, we still, you know, there's enough noise going on around that, you know, we want to get back to you know, some of the value based, you know, real earnest discussions with our clients. So just interested. I know that was a discussion point that, you know, we talked about in the pre-call. Kind of where do you guys stand on finding that balance of you know, kind of looking at what's trending in the moment and kind of following the herd, so to speak, in the messaging and being relevant versus, okay, you know, that's fine. We need to have that as part of it, but kind of getting back to some of the, you know, not normalcy, but, you know, getting back to the core things that you got to market and communicate. And I think both of you guys from a content and from a social data have, you know, unique eyes on this. You know, interested in kind of how you guys play out that balance.
Yeah. So I think it's a mix. I think for every brand, there are going to be unique challenges that your audience is facing right now. I just don't think there's very many use cases in which that isn't true. And then you have to think about, of those challenges that you're hearing from them, the questions that they're answering, whether it's, you know, search trends that are spiking, things you're seeing through social listening, or honestly, even more importantly, things you're hearing in terms of questions your sales and CS people are getting on the ground. They're one of the most important resources to tap into. It's likely that there are going to be a few big topics that people are craving for you to address. And so I'll give us, for example, with our own marketing. Challenge that a lot of big companies are facing is suddenly they are collaborating on content completely remotely. They are not unable to go over and have a talk of a creative conversation with someone who is writing a piece or shooting a video. You're losing that touch point in terms of the creative collaboration. Now, for us, we spent like the last 8 or 9 years working with brands remotely on our platform on all sorts of products, all sorts of projects. And so this is something that we're super comfortable with. So logically, we said, okay, let's do a virtual education event around best practices for collaborating on content remotely. And it was a mix of both like practical editorial advice, but also a lot of human psychology and behavior on remote working and collaboration. Because luckily for me, one of our co-founders, Shane Snow, is a best-selling author on this topic. I wrote a book called Dream Team. So him and our editor-in-chief, Jordan, got together to do a webinar on this, and it was super valuable for people. Similarly, we hear from a lot of our prospects and our customers that they're having to make a fresh case for content that they might have made 3 months ago, but now everyone's budget is under attack, essentially. So they were asking for help on how do I make this case. So I laid that out in a long blog post, and I'm doing that as another virtual education event in a couple weeks. So are those core topics that I think we need to jump on simply because it helps people right now. At the same time, you don't want to just be opportunistic and put coronavirus in the lead of every single piece that you write or every single video that you create or every single email that you send for the sake of doing it. Because a lot of times people do just want that escape from everything that's going on. They don't need to be reminded of it at the top of every piece of content they consume. So you just have to figure out, like, is this a case where this is something that I can uniquely give advice about that people are going to find helpful? And if it's not, I probably wouldn't lean into it at all because it is just sort of trite and obligatory.
Yeah. Liz, any opinions on that?
I think something that sparked for me a little bit was the idea that at the beginning of something like this, there is a, forgive my language, but an oh shit moment we all have where we have to sort of circle our own wagons, figure out how this affects our own businesses. Then the next step is to think about how it affects our customers and our wider audience. And then we sort of all come together from those places in this mutual understanding of the challenges we're all facing, and we move forward sort of as a business community in this kind of we're all in this together way. So it's almost like the 5 stages of understanding, not grief, but of understanding crisis, that I think has been really interesting to watch. The brands that I think are going to weather this best and are making some of the smartest decisions right now are those that have invested in the idea of who their brand is. So, when you have a strong brand, the idea that brand has a way of walking and talking and being in the world that can apply to any situation you find your business in is really, really important. So, for instance, we have a brand persona with Sprout we call the Passionate Professor. And we had to ask ourselves, how would the Passionate Professor react to this situation? And it helped guide a lot of what we felt like our timeline was for certain types of communication, for opening up channels. And of course, we took a pause to let our community give us indication of what they wanted from us before we picked up our social publishing again, that kind of thing. But we're coming at it from that lens of really understanding who we are as a brand and letting that guide us through how we guide our customers and our audience in their own challenges.
And how do you see that intertwined with the goodwill efforts of brands? Because I feel like that is such a big part of knowing who your brand is at this point. Like we're a small startup, we're not flush with cash, but as soon as this happened, we realized we need to do something to help freelance creatives who, not necessarily through our platform, but in the wider world, are going to start losing work right now. And so, we partner with Freelancers Union to raise emergency grants for them. And I think you saw the brands who know themselves the best doing this across the board very quickly. Do you see that as a trend, in the social data that you're analyzing?
We're seeing the most successful. I think a lot of brands have put themselves forward as trying to help throughout this crisis. The ones that are being the most successful are when that effort is aligned with what their audiences have seen from them in the past as a brand, but also when it's aligned to something that will actually make a difference for somebody. So, I write a regular column for one of our blogs about how brands are responding to whatever's going on in the specific moment. So this has been a very fruitful time for that column. But even thinking about a brand like Peloton, which has weathered some negativity recently, has been interesting to see because their effort was to waive membership fees for 2 months for anyone who's struggling to pay their membership fees, which I think is it's a very interesting move, considering that, their brand is in a position to grow quite a bit because of this. Yeah. It's also a very specific audience and a small audience, but they know that audience. They know how dedicated they are to the brand and to being a part of the community. And they want to make sure that that continues for the people who have helped build the brand from the ground up, which is the customers. But not everybody can do that, nor do they have the type of, product that aligns so well to the situation the way Peloton does. So Joe, I think you made a great comment earlier about having a responsibility to either provide an emotional escape or some means of connection. So we've seen a lot of brands using their social presence as a means of connecting people in need to people who have resources, or as just being a place where their audiences can come to talk with like-minded folks about something that isn't coronavirus. So
yeah, I think that's a great point. And Jill isn't here, unfortunately, but I will give Allstate a shout out as a brand that I think has stepped up in a really solid way in terms of giving back. I think was it $600 million in premiums to people right now to help them get through this time. I mean, I think that's one of the best brand activations that we've seen. And I do think that everyone has something they can do to help. And a lot of times that manifests in just taking care of your own people, especially when you're a larger corporation. I'll give Marriott's one of our clients. We'll definitely give them some props for being really proactive in leading by example in terms of cutting executive pay and ensuring that they were able to, protect their workers as much as they could. Leading with voluntary furloughs. I think that's often one of the most important things to do, is sort of let your employees have some ability to, dictate who can make sacrifices right now to help out the greater good of your employees. And I think we also see just a lot of great relief efforts from even smaller brands. Like I'll give a shout out to Shafqat Islam, who's the CEO of one of our biggest competitors, NewsCred, and he put together an effort to buy 1 million masks for New York City hospitals early in the crisis because he had a connection in China. And I think, that's something that I really admired from him. And I think that the brands that have gotten the best brand marketing boost during this, which feels like such a crass thing to talk about, but it's the reality of our jobs. The ones that have seen their brand shine the most during this time are the ones that haven't just talked the talk, but have walked the walk in some way and put together an effort to help the larger world, because we are suddenly entering a very collectivist age as a society. We don't see it probably most dramatically here in New York, which is one of the most individualistic places you can imagine. But right now it's like a completely collectivist place. And I think everyone feels a strong connection to people who are going above and beyond to help.
Well, guys, I'm going to put the contrarian hat on here a little bit again. I would think a lot of our audience today probably aren't representing big brands, right? They're probably more the smaller companies that, or entrepreneurs, or consultants, contractors, and so. I think there are opportunities. I've learned this. I guess I'm getting older. I've been through my first crisis. So. There's some lessons, some real lessons to be learned. I think we touched on some of them. This cycle of, oh shit, now what, to pulling back, and then through. And I've spent a lot of time. Most of my close friends are entrepreneurs as well, and so we've been on, like everybody, been on Zoom conferences and kind of sharing war stories. But there are opportunities that and there are chances to be opportunistic. And I don't mean from a brand tone and messaging, going out, but I'm talking about places to be, that you can take advantage, when everybody's pulling back, to be able to pull forward. And I think that can especially be true if you're a smaller company. And one of those that I've seen is a lot of our big brands pivoted, kind of like what we've said here, both in message and in tactics, to be much more inwardly focused, much more social media, much more client focused, and literally just froze all ad spending, just done, for a quarter, we're not going to spend any money on, and we've had several, large global brands that I've seen that. And so if you're looking to do advertising or there's, having been on the phone with some different media publishers, they're willing to, roll up the sleeves. They're hungry for business too. And everybody's got to kind of keep the wheels of commerce moving. So, for me, I see, and I think this is true more at a, entrepreneur level, but, I think, being opportunistic, can be a good thing, right? Like, I mean, we need folks to find the silver linings in all of this to kind of pull through. And so, I've seen a lot of folks that have had to completely pivot their business, 180 in a week kind of thing, and coming up with new solutions, coming up with new offers, and those kind of things. So, would love to hear kind of, Lizz, I remember you were saying that your company offered some new offers that are related to this. What have you guys seen, or even kind of philosophically feel about where I guess what I'm getting at is where are the windows of opportunity here if we're talking to other kind of small business marketers or
Sure. There is also a question I'm seeing in the public chat about whether there is any validity to casting a less wide net right now, which I think aligns with what you're asking, Todd. The sales cycles, I think, are getting a lot shorter for a lot of different use cases right now, specifically because people don't have time to try to figure out how they want to use your product or service. They want to know that you understand their immediate problem and you're able to help them immediately. So with casting a less wide net and focusing on a smaller group of people or smaller group of prospects who have a very specific problem right now, I think a good example from this Sprout experience might be in social customer care. So it's something that we do very well with CRM tracking, conversation history, that kind of thing. Being able to report across large customer care teams to things such as like wait times and issue resolution and that kind of thing on social specifically. And social has become an even more important channel for customer care than I think it was even a couple of months ago. So being able to lean into that use case and to focus on prospects that have that use case right now because they're having to expand their social customer care practice because of the situation that we're all in. Is one area that we've had to do that too. We've had to find a specific focus that we can answer immediately and present both the problem and the solution in one conversation rather than doing a lot of discovery to figure out what that problem is and then trying to find a multi-layered solution for them. It's just here's the problem, here's the solution. Sales cycle is shorter and more immediate and focused on a really specific problem. Have you seen that too, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'll give our personal experience first. Like one of the first things we did is reevaluate which markets we wanted to really address and prioritize right now. So, for instance, we sort of take a quarterly approach to where we're focusing from a marketing and content strategy. It's almost like an editorial theme, right? So this past quarter has been really focusing on a lot of data, research, educational events for financial services. Q2 was going to be B2B technology. But once this hit, we realized that we should actually swap Q2 and Q3. Q3 was going to be healthcare and do healthcare now because healthcare was seeing a greater communication demand. We were seeing that in terms of our inbound, a lot more demo requests from healthcare companies. We're also seeing a situation where healthcare companies are ready to bring on new vendors, whereas most B2B technology companies are doing a marketing budget freeze right now as they see how their customers are adapting. So that was a pivot that we've had to make, and we've been, working really, really hard to basically refine our marketing and our sales talk track and all of that to align our value proposition with the healthcare industry and specifically the healthcare technology and services industry, more on the B2B side as much as possible. And I think every business should be doing that, right? Like if you are just doing marketing and sales in a business as usual way right now, it's likely that you're going to be leaving a lot of opportunities on the table. At the same time, like I think that isn't mutually exclusive in any way with the idea of really focusing on doing good and helping people as much as possible. It's just doing that thought exercise of what are the industries, what are the types of people, the personas that I'm most likely to be able to help with my product right now. And we know that's going to be much more likely in healthcare right now that, you know, it is in travel, which is normally a huge segment for us.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the clock, so I think we're coming up at our time. We had a lot we didn't get to today, but one of the things that I think we were just touching on that I think is relevant to really kind of bring out is this focus on communication and relationships, and we've definitely seen this in our business in that, you know, our pipeline is actually growing, but it's mostly been not trying to go out and market and get new leads and kind of go through a whole new sales cycle. It's doubling down into the relationships you have and in our client relationships, knowing that many of them are going, well, all of them are going through some form of radical, you know, issue, is being even more responsive than we have been, you know, not, you know, with an agency, one of the challenges is always, well, we change scope. Well, it costs more hours. That's more dollars, right? Like that's just part of the daily hassle. So try to be much more relaxed and be fluid and like, okay, we have to scrap everything and start over again. And you know, feel like we've seen, you know, really, we already had good relationships, but really, you know, taking it to that true friendship, that true, you know, folks that you can count on and depend on. So, you know, the question we were talking about earlier is like, what do you do if, you know, Joe, you mentioned, you know, travel, airlines, what do you do if that's your market? Well, those guys are on fire right now. And I think it came up that, you know, well, they're still, you know, they still have to respond. They still have to deal with stuff. They're, you know, they still have, they're trying to hold on and to their client base and relationship management. So, you know, that was definitely one thing I heard as a consensus about marketing and biz dev in this era is, you know, really be focused on that, you know, kind of mending and whether they're client relationships, professional relationships, across the board. That is, I think there's an ethos now of wanting to help and be responsive. And so, you know, that's I guess an area of opportunity that I guess from my perspective, I'd like to, you know, convey is one of the positives that's, you know, learnings that's come out of all of this. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting to, you know, we spent a lot of time right at the beginning of diving in this for ourselves, talking about the difference between crisis comms and comms during a crisis, and that what we're facing now is the latter. And so when you talk about an industry like travel or like the airline industry, they're all affected the same way. So making sure that you are focusing on not only your customer relationships, but your industry relationships and your greater brand perception during this time will put you in the best position to come out of this ahead of the game, because everyone's facing the same challenges. So how you answer those challenges will define your brand in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And I do think this is why content is one of the smartest investments you can make right now, because if you're, you know, spending a lot of your budget towards more direct response ads, like you're not likely to be successful in a lot of industries right now. But if you've been building relationships with people, no matter what industry you're in, there's an opportunity to continue to nurture those relationships with like helpful, interesting content. You know, what we see in a lot of our travel clients is that they're pivoting towards satiating people's needs for like virtual exploration, for planning that trip in the future that we all want to fantasize about for when this is all over, from diving into the coolest virtual tours that people are putting together virtual tours of their own, because we all really like crave that escapism right now. I think if you're in B2B technology like we are, and you're finding that a lot of people maybe are a little bit hesitant in your pipeline to pull the trigger, well, you still want to keep being that helpful partner for them, and producing content and educational events that'll help them get through that. And then you'll have, you know, a lot of warm leads for when this is all over that you can accelerate quickly again. And then you can save up that paid media budget for when people are actually really ready to buy. But you know, that those relationships to both of your points, doesn't just go away because we're in a crisis right now. People, still want to hear from you if you have something worthwhile to say.
Perfect. Well, we're coming up. I think we've got a couple of more minutes. So I'll tee up one more topic. We'll spend a couple of minutes on. We talked about what are some of the other kind of tactical shifts that we're seeing in the marketplace. I think we've talked a lot about content and social, but I guess beyond that, from things like moving to online events, trade shows not being something is readily available. So, sharing my perspective first, and then kind of go around to you two. We work with a lot of, like I said, B2B brands, so business to business, many verticals. Marketing is kind of takes a backseat to sales. Big sales teams go into trade shows, relationships kind of drive most of the revenue, and this has created both a need and an opportunity for marketing departments to really help their companies quickly evolve and adapt to things that may seem commonplace to us in the tech world. Things like webinars and virtual events.
Mm-hmm.
They're really not widespread if you get into manufacturing or you're getting into some of the more traditional things. So we've definitely seen that be both a challenge, but really an opportunity. Almost always there's a marketing department who's been banging their head against the wall for since they've been there, to try to get more investment and more credibility for marketing to be part of the revenue. The revenue and sales organization. And so this has presented both an opportunity and to better support the sales organizations and kind of scrambling to figure out how to do these kind of programs. So I don't know, just going back around the table, do you guys have any other kind of observations or thoughts on how you're seeing organizations kind of deal with these challenges? Or it looks like Michael's about to join us.
Hey, speed round real quick, and then I'll kick us off into the next session.
We'll talk fast.
Go?
Laser go.
All right. I think that being in close touch with your sales team is super important right now. Understand the questions they're getting from prospects, the pain points they're having, if they need help with objection handling. Marketing is often that source of knowledge about what's happening in the market, how to best position the product, position your offering. So, the biggest piece of advice, which you always should be following, is just talk to your sales team a lot.
Perfect.
Sure. And we as marketers are seeing some of the broad changes faster than individual members of the sales team can. So we're taking it upon ourselves to make sure that we are keeping them in that position of thought leadership, especially as what thought leadership, the definition of that is changing every day. It was pretty easy to be a social media thought leader 3 months ago because while it changes quickly, it didn't change every 24 hours. And now it does. So we're having to have those conversations about what the most important points to make, not only from a marketing perspective, but from how we should be positioning our product perspective, are changing rapidly. And we're the ones who are kind of on the front lines, making sure everyone is aware of that.
Perfect.
Well,
Mike, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today. This has been just a wildly informative session for me. I think that everybody can say the same. Such good insights and just a really good conversation. Liz and Joe, you shared some info on how to get in touch. Todd, real quick, Twitter, email, anything you'd like to share for people to get in touch before we kick people to the next session.
Yeah, just email Davison, Davison @demandfrontier.com.
And for everybody who's on right now, you will be joining the next session almost immediately. There might be a short 10, 15 second break above the noise, how to communicate with your customers during COVID. And without further ado, I'm going to end this session and kick you to the next one.
All right. Thanks, everybody.